Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command.
The Cardiac Commanders are the Clutch Commanders!
With former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Take command coming your way alongside Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant Paulsen. One final opportunity to look at this Commanders roster ahead of their preseason finale with the Baltimore Ravens at home Saturday afternoon, and then eventually cut down day to form the roster at 53 early next week. Logan, as someone who played a decade in the league, this is one of those weeks where, you know, the cynical view from the outside, people will always say, oh, these games don't matter. They matter a whole lot. I mean, they don't count, but there are players battling for their careers in the days ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think there is a certain lack of empathy when it comes to these games. And like, these games are a big deal, you know, and I think we're going to talk about it in more detail as the show goes on. But I think there's going to be, you know, four guys that end up making the team. And this is going to be a big data point in their production. And this is a funny game to be a part of. And I think I might have told versions of this story elsewhere. But I remember my first year, my rookie year in the NFL, we were playing the Arizona Cardinals, and the Arizona Cardinals were playing their starters because like they were all ramped up. They said, we got to be starting fast. So they played them in the fourth preseason game. So we were going to play. And I remember walking down to the film room to watch film with Darrell Young. And he had just got in there a little bit ahead of me, and he was walking down the hall, and I was like, hey man, I thought we were watching film. He goes, Bobby Turner just kicked me out. He said he's getting ready for week one. And it's this weird time because like half the guys that are on the roster are looking ahead. And there's like this group of guys, probably 30 guys, that are like, this is really, really important for me in my career. And so it is kind of a funny game when you're on the team, when you're on the 90-man roster, trying to find your path in this moment. But yeah, it's a big deal, I think, for a lot of guys.
I actually think that may have been the exact same game where my favorite final game of the preseason story ever happened. May have been a year or two later, but it was around that time. And I think it might have been in Arizona. But Robert Henson, if you remember, the linebacker from Texas Christian, was like in a roster battle. And it ended up being a sad ending because he got hurt in the game pretty seriously. But he had one of the most incredible preseason performances for a guy on the bubble, where he was just playing maniacally. He was making every this It felt like your buddy in high school who has like 26 tackles in a game and like just can't be blocked. And I remember thinking, I mean, this is how many years later, 16 years later, I'm still thinking about it, but it was one of the most inspirational, motivational performances I've ever seen of a dude who like clearly knew, if I play a great game, I can make the roster. And the sad part was he gets hurt. But like, you see that sometimes. You see guys that will themselves essentially onto a football team. And maybe it's not the 53. I know that for a lot of us as fans, that's what we care about. That's what we pay attention to. But, you know, when I covered the league, when you were playing, you know, the practice squad money was $87,000 a year or whatever, which was still a good living. It's now well over, you know, six figures. It's really good money. So for these guys that make the P squad, which is bigger now anyway, like they got kids, they got a family. This is life-changing stuff.
Yeah, and that's what I keep telling people. Like, I got a lot of clients, and like, it's kind of that I train, and then it's kind of getting to that time of year where people are like, I don't know if I'm going to make it, or what happens if I don't make it. I'm like, man, just keep your foot in the door. And so now with these larger practice squad sizes, like, it's a great opportunity. And the way you can elevate, like, that's what I was talking to one of my clients last night, and he was kind of tripping about it. He's like, I don't know if I want to be on practice. So I'm like, bud, you're in the club, man. You're in there. You might not be in the VIP just yet, but someone's going to get kicked out and you're going to have an opportunity to step in there. So just to me, I remember, again, my rookie year, like thinking if I made the NFL practice squad, man, that would be pretty special. And I think people sleep on it. Like, I was talking to my son about this last night. We were watching Hard Knocks, and he goes, like, that guy's not very good. I'm like, oh, and let me tell you something, bud. Like, everybody you see on this screen is the best football player you've ever seen. And people don't understand that. They think this practice squad dude's a scrub or whatever, but they're awesome. They're awesome athletes, awesome football players. And it's just about finding kind of that perfect mix of luck and good fortune and hard work. And when that all kind of coalesces, you get your opportunity, and hopefully you're ready. You're ready when the bell rings, kind of deal. So
it's a tough league when a guy like me sitting on the couch putting my chips and dip down to yell about how you're not any good. Or your 10-year-old son's like, wow, this dude is washed. You know?
Yeah, I'm like, no, son. We don't in this house. We don't say that because your dad was washed in a lot of people's eyes for a long time.
Yeah. Hey, you were a survivor. You hung around. All right. I want to get into a couple of these other storylines in this final preseason game. And then the layout here on Take Command today is going to be that we're going to dive into some important roster battles, position battles. We're going to look at the offensive and defensive sides of the ball over the next couple of segments coming up and players for you guys to track in this Ravens preseason game. But one thing I've been wrestling with, I want to get insight from you on. It's going to be tough for me to feel great about the passing game regardless because they haven't had everyone out there yet, right? Even in this dress rehearsal against the Bengals where the first team O goes 74 yards, 4 plays, scores a touchdown, Jayden Daniels does not attempt to pass because his lone dropback's a 14-yard touchdown run. But on top of that, you didn't have Noah Brown, you didn't have Terry McLaurin, you didn't have Zach Ertz, you didn't have 3 of your 5 offensive linemen. So I don't think any of that
doesn't play, right?
Right, Eckler was not involved. Yeah. So in the preseason finale, it's not like they're going to run everybody out there against the Ravens, even if a couple starters go, which I'm not even sure that that's going to be the case. We haven't heard that yet. But I guess my question would be, can you be okay with Jayden Daniels not attempting a single pass in a game since the NFC Championship game?
Dude, we talked about this a little bit in like a production meeting, like after the other show, and I've been thinking about it since we had that conversation. And the thing that comes to mind is like, so little background here is like, I was like, I need every rep. I need every opportunity. I need to feel it, need to be in it. I need the preseason games to get ready. And there's a lot of guys like Tana of that generation. Tana's a little bit older than me, obviously, but he kind of had the same mindset. I need to get in, need to, run my 10 plays, need to get 3 or 4 balls in a preseason game, and then I'm good. Shut it down and hit the season. But I think now you look around the league and it's way different in terms of how people approach these games. Like it is strictly for evaluation in a lot of senses, right? So like you look at some of the top guys like Jalen Hurts, 0 preseason snaps, Josh Allen, 0 preseason snaps. Patrick Mahomes has 3, Lamar Jackson has 0, Matt Stafford has 0. And obviously there's other people that have more, and everyone kind of has their own approach and own philosophy to this. But the thing I came back to was like, the reason you'd want him to play is to get the CPU working, right? Am I seeing the coverages correctly? Am I seeing the blitzes? Am I getting the protections called correctly? All those kind of things. And I can attest to this because I did it. Like preseason is like the vanilla of vanilla. Like it's fun to play in the preseason because it's not hard. It's like, it's easy, right? So I'm like, the benefit of having him play would be to have him see complicated stuff, and there will be no complicated stuff, right? There will be no, I'm going to disguise this cover 3. It's actually cover 2, or here's a fire zone and I got to get the ball out quick. That's not what this is, right? And so I think that's ultimately I came to the conclusion. It's like, yeah, because why the work, if they do play, great. He's getting to put the uniform on, getting the call in the headset. You're working process, you're working substitutions. But in terms of the things that he needs, all that stuff would have come in the joint practice. You know what I'm saying? So like, that's where you get the real value of developing a quarterback is when you see, hey, this is Baltimore, man. They're running all these 6-man fire zones and it's crazy. And we're kind of showing these simulated pressures and we're really, is it 6 or is it 4? And where's the ball? Where's my hot answer? All that kind of stuff. Are we picked up? But you're not getting that in the preseason. They're not going to do it. So is there a value to it? Sure. But it's more logistical, right? It's not an actual developmental process for him.
So to that end, I have come around substantially to these joint practices being way more effective in getting starters ready than even a preseason game, because I am team preseason and always have been, right? The joint practices unequivocally, and this has been the case for a long time. I remember Shanahan saying as much, just because you can dictate, right?
Yeah,
I can make sure we run red zone, goal line, 2-minute, 4-minute. You can't do that in a game. I might not get a 2-minute situation, a red zone situation. So they're more helpful in that way, obviously, right? No doubt about it. But a couple of points just to what you said. Number one, they don't get those joint practices with the Ravens. Not their fault necessarily. I guess Baltimore says it's mutual. Didn't feel mutual to me. I don't really know what happened, but it seems like the Ravens didn't want to participate in these practices. So, okay, you lose that. They did get it with the Patriots, but that's a long time ago now, and they got some good work there. The other point I would make is you just rattled off a bunch of quarterbacks that didn't play in the preseason, and this has been the case now for several years where a lot of those veterans, you're in the same offense for years, you don't play in the preseason. I get that. This is a year 2 guy who has played in in his case, 17 football games at this point. Like, I see that the Falcons are doing this with Michael Penix Jr., by the way.
Yeah.
He started 3 games. They're going, you're good. We'll get you to the regular season. Jayden may have arrived. Like, there's a chance at the end of this year he's in the elite now. We've said for a long time it's 4 horsemen in quarterbacking. It's Burrow and Lamar and Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and maybe it's 5 deep now with Jayden Daniels. Like, Washington may have that guy, but I guess this is acting as if, in a sense, for me, where you're taking a year 2 guy and you're going, well, if Allen doesn't do it. And then the last point I'll make that I want you to react to is, like, the Rams have not taken the preseason seriously for years. They always get off to slow starts.
Yeah.
The Bengals are changing what they're doing because they basically punted on August, and it backfired on them. So I think there's been some correction from some clubs that feel like
Sure.
they don't start well enough.
Yeah, and I think the Atlanta one's interesting because, Raheem Morris is a LA guy, right? Him and Sean are really
McVay
close.
disciple.
He worked there for a long time, and so they have a very similar approach. And ultimately, I come back to maybe the number one statistic in terms of determining winning percentage at the end of the year is roster health, right? So if you're making a decision to promote roster health, I think it's probably the right decision. And so that's what every time you walk in one of these preseasons, every time you walk in one of these joint practices, you're assessing that risk of how banged up is the roster going to be post this event. And so, like, Tom Brady for the longest time only did joint practices, no preseason games. And even he gets the ACL in that preseason game against Tampa Bay, whatever, or in the joint practice, whenever, like, for 5 years from the end of his career. And so obviously nothing is without risk. And so I think that's kind of what you're getting at there. And so you said this on the last show, and I thought it was a great point. It's like, if Laramie Tunsil's not going to play, right? If Brandon Coleman's not going to play, and we've kind of got that offensive line played great in the game. And I think they're going to play great if that's the offensive line you have to walk into week 1. Like, why am I going to trot him out there when maybe I don't have my best pieces available, right? Zach's going to be on a pitch count because of who he is, because of his experience. That's like your man answer, your hot answer versus certain coverage. If he's not going to play, like, I'm not giving him the best tools to be successful. So, and it's almost at this point, like, he's going to get a better look because you've been at practice. You've seen how the defense works. He's going to get a better look from our defense in practice in terms of quick decisions, where the ball's got to go. So again, like, I am a preseason guy also. Like I told you, my process, I need that. I felt like I needed that real bad when I was playing. But when I come back to it, it's like, is it going to actually help him get better? And I'm not sure that it will, because if Baltimore's not playing their starters, it's going to be a bunch of Jag backups, right? And you're going to pick that apart probably, right? No matter who's playing wide receiver. And then you're just exposing him to injury. And so,
they're not
if he
game
does,
planning, and it's vanilla.
Yeah, it's super vanilla. Like, I'll tell you, in that 3rd preseason game or 4th preseason game when I was playing, it was day 1 install from the defense. They're running one coverage, they're running run front, and you could just let that thing rip. And if you had anybody with any kind of experience, you were going to win the game at the quarterback spot, right? Like, that's what that game is. And so, and I love it. And again, 4 or 5 guys are going to make the team off that game tonight, on Saturday, which is great. But that's the thing I came back to. It's like, as much as I think it helps with preparation, help me with my preparation, is it really going to help Jayden Daniels? And again, this is a situation that's outside of the team's control. The joint practice gets canceled. I don't think you need to course correct necessarily, because, like, hunting for reps, if they're not going to be valuable reps, like, work just for work's sake is not valuable.
I've said that for a long time to my wife, so I'm glad that you feel that way about football as well. Put your hat on real quick as a coach. So this is Stonebridge Bulldogs Logan Paulsen then. Here is my last concern I will wage before we get into the offense and the defensive players to watch, position groups to monitor here. It's a long time without actual football for this team.
Yeah.
I thought Dan Quinn did an incredible thing when he had the burgundy and gold scrimmage, but I don't know if you can go back to that well. Like, that was a really manufactured kind of college, like, this is a gray versus white game or whatever, and there was a juice in the building. How do you, if you're a coach, not have your team effectively go 3 weeks without playing? I worry about the baseball team going into the division series that hasn't hit in a week, now having to face a number 1 starter. Am I overthinking that?
I don't think so. I think that is something that needs to be negotiated, needs to be definitely thought about 100%. I think the thing that I look about there is, like, that's where coaches make their money. It's like, hey, do we give guys a couple days off, let them refresh, recharge? Because I will say this, like, I came out of a couple hard training camps when I was playing, and I wasn't physically right until probably like week 4 or 5 of the season. Like just heavy legs, banged up elbows, wrists, and then you're like, and then eventually you find your legs and you feel okay. And so I do think this kind of served as a unique opportunity to make sure, hey man, like we can be as fresh as possible for week 1. We can be super fresh, divisional game. Let's go get this thing. And I think it's just about managing, keeping the guys physically fresh, obviously. But the other thing I want to point out to fans is there's a mental element to this too, right? Like when you're on a stretch with no game, and training camp is like the time that this happens, it is mentally fatiguing. And so like days off, how to make everything feel novel and new and different. And Dan does a great job of making practice feel fun and exciting every single day. But that's what this, to me, that's the issue. Like I think you can get them so that they feel good, because the Giants are going through the same stuff. They're going to go through the same things. Every team's going to have to navigate this 3-week window, and the team that navigates the best is the team that's going to win week 1. And so as a coach, how do you not over prepare? How do you make sure the guys are mentally and physically fresh while not taking too much off the gas pedal? It's a fine line, and you really have to know your team. You really got to know your horses in this case, and put yourself in the best position to be successful.
Take command with the Paulsens, Logan and Grant with you. All right, we're going to go to the offensive side of the ball next. Players that have to help themselves in this preseason finale against the Ravens. And what do we know about the position groups as we look ahead to forming the 53-man roster? We'll get into that in moments on Take Command. Welcome back to Take Command. He's Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant Paulsen. One more tune-up for the Commanders, very likely without many of their starters. To Dan Quinn's credit, you mentioned last segment, part of the goal here is to get as many of your guys through camp in the preseason healthy and ready to go as possible, and knock on wood, they've certainly done that at a very high level with their starters. If the starters aren't going against the Ravens, they'll be in a pretty good spot to start the season healthy with many of their key players. But this final game is a great opportunity, as we talked about, for roster battles and to try to figure out the back of the roster at various positions. So let's isolate the offense here, put the spotlight on the O. What do you feel like we know the least about right now? Where are there the most questions going into this game?
Well, for me, it's got to be wide receiver, right? I mean, I don't know if I don't know if there's a position that is so in flux, right? And even if Terry's here, right? And I'm one of the guys that's very optimistic. I think he's going to get signed sooner rather than later. But like Terry, Noah Brown, who's negotiating this knee thing, Deebo Samuel, Jalen Lane, and then Luke McCaffrey seem to be your kind of knockout 5 there. And then it's like, who's the 6th guy? And it feels like that guy, barring an excellent preseason game, is maybe not on this roster, And so like, that's the one for me. It's like, there's just been a lack of dynamism in the preseason games. Like think about, Mitchell Tinsley, right? And how well he played and how dynamic he was. I look at this and I'm like, no one in training camp and in the training camp practice I've been to has been consistent enough to kind of say, I deserve the spot. Like, Chris Moore has had moments, right? But like, it's been inconsistent. We talked about Jalen Lane's consistently. Even Ja'Cory Brooks, I know he's kind of the fan favorite at the moment, but he's had good days and he's had quiet days. And for me, guys that make the roster are guys that stack days, right? Jalen Lane has stacked days. He's shown up every day in some capacity, whether it's on teams or whether it's on offense. And that's how you make a roster. And no one else seems to, at least to my eye, and I'm not watching the All-22. So maybe the coaches are like, man, we love the way Chris Moore handles himself in meetings. He's super locked in. He's a pro's pro. He's ready to rock and roll. And that's totally fine. I respect that. But just from my observations of practice, I'm waiting for someone to kind of say, hey, I'm the guy. And to me, it's that room that feels the most in flux and with the most question marks heading into the preseason game and obviously heading into this little break before season starts.
And as you said, the biggest part of that is going to be, is Terry McLaurin on the field against the Giants or not? Is Noah Brown? Everybody's talking about Terry for good reason. He's the wide receiver 1 here. But Brown's health is also a significant deal. He was really helpful last year. I mean, he runs some of those in breakers and he can box guys out and be physical. His role in this offense when he was going, I thought changed things for them as a formidable number 2, not just opposite McLaurin, but to give them that size in the middle of the field. He immediately made an impact. Remember, that first game he played, I think, was the home game against the Giants in week 2, and he caught the big pass to set up the game-winning field goal.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And he's a guy that, like, when he's out there, he's only been out there for probably think about it, probably 3 days of training camp practice, maybe 2, and you feel him. It feels different. Like it's really hard to articulate to someone who doesn't watch and has never been to a practice, like there's just a size, speed, physical violence element to receiver play, and that's different between varsity and JV, right? And when he gets out there, you definitely feel that varsity element to him. And so again, like your 1A, 1B, your 1 and 2 receivers not participating a ton in camp for very different reasons. And then obviously Debo and his role. And again, Debo's been outstanding in camp. Like he's the guy that's had the consistent explosive plays, the multiple touches from different spots in the offense. So he's going to be a feature, but like you'd like him to be an accent piece to what those other 2 guys can do. And we talked about Jalen Lane. I think he's had a great camp. I think he's definitely the 4th guy. And then Luke, probably because of what he does on teams from a coverage standpoint, probably makes that 5th spot. But again, like again, like to me, there, like every year, I feel like since I've covered the team, and maybe you can attest to this too, Grant, there's always like, oh, who's going to be the 6th guy? There's Bryson Tremaine and Missile Tinsley and these guys that you see flashes from. And I feel like this year it's been a little bit more quiet than that.
I think that's fair. I also think people have to remember that players are going to get cut from all over the league.
Yeah.
And the Commanders have a list of guys they're intrigued by, and they have more intel generally in those front offices and in those coaching staffs of who might even be cut. Like they have great insight just from talking to people around football. So I would not be surprised if there's a receiver on this roster against the Giants who has not been taking part in camp. But I want to focus on the guys that are here that can control themselves going into this game.
Yeah.
Start with Luke McCaffrey, because frankly, it was a little disappointing that for me, he didn't get targeted or a catch against the Bengals. He was out there in the second half, 3rd-round pick last year. What do you see from him when you watch him on tape? His separation scores analytically last year were phenomenal in terms of getting open and getting free. But at some point, as I say at receiver, it's about production, right? You got to get targets, you got to get catches. So what's his path to doing that now? If he is running good routes and occasionally getting open, how does he get to a point where he's trusted enough to be heavily involved?
For me, I think it'd be interesting if the staff was just like, hey, let's see if we can get Luke 5 touches in this game. Let's just see. Was it a screen? Is it a reverse? Is it, like a deep in cut? Whatever he wants. Let's see if we can get him a couple touches and get that ball rolling for him, right? Because I think that's ultimately what fans want to see is like, because there are moments in practice, like where he does flash, like he caught a go ball. I want to say it was last week or 2 weeks ago, where he really nice contested catch over the shoulder. There's like a little choice route he run, like there are moments, right? But I think it's just like the lack of volume again, because like when you compare him just to Jalen Lane 1-to-1, like Jalen Lane again is making plays in practice almost every day. And so why isn't Luke doing the same thing? And I think maybe it's role, maybe it's how the staff views him, maybe it could be a million different things. Because it's interesting, like I said, there are moments like when you watch that last game where it's like, oh, he's open here, he could get this ball, and then again, there are times where he's in tight coverage and it's not great. So I think like it's just some of it's serendipity, some of it's chance, but I would like personally, just as a fan of Luke and as a fan of the team, just to say, hey, like let's see what happens if he is like the number 1 or number 2 guy, and we kind of force feed him some targets. Like, what does that look like for him?
My perception on the outside has always been that that's kind of what this game is. Like if I'm Grant Kingsbury, I'm making a list of 7 dudes that I need more information on. And then I'm actually calling the game through that lens. Like, okay, if I'm trying to figure out, Dan Quinn had an interesting comment that I really liked about Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt as an example after the Bengals game. And he said, we're still learning Bill.
Yeah.
I think that means like we need to figure out not only what he can do and what he can't do, but how does he respond when we run this up front? Is he, patient enough behind pullers? Does he like power? Can he do zone stuff? Like they're figuring him out as they go. There's just not a lot of time on the grass, and kind of got the ball rolling in my head on, all right, if I'm a coordinator, like if there's something I want to know about Ja'Cory Brooks, we're going to find it out in this game. I'm going to design this look. I'm hopefully getting the coverage I want, and I'm going to see, can he beat this? Can he win? Can he do this? Is that how this game works, or is that like oversimplified?
I think at least in my experience, like again, like a lot of the coaches are already thinking about the New York Giants, right?
Okay.
Like they want to give these guys an opportunity to be successful. So I don't want to make it sound like they're skipping over the game.
Yeah.
But like they got to get ready, man. Like that's the one that counts, right? And so again, like in my career, if you're playing in the fourth game or the third game late, after they changed the schedule, it was kind of like, you're gonna handle this like this. These guys are gonna handle this like these players, and we're gonna be thinking about this next thing. And so there might be a man. I've seen this happen before where they're like, hey, let's make sure we get this guy 2 looks, and then see if we can get him out of the game because we don't want him to get hurt or whatever. Like, let's just see if we can get him rolling and get his confidence going in this game. But it's a weird ecosystem of like, how much do people really pay attention and prioritize this? Because like, the talent evaluation is going to happen regardless, right? It's going to be like, hey, like, we're going to run our day 1 install, day 2 install. The guys are going to look good or they're not going to look good. And I think that you hear this all the time. Like, you want guys playing fast and physical. Now it's just like, do you say, hey, it wouldn't be hard for Cliff to be like, hey, let's just make sure Ben Sinnott gets 3 touches or Luke McCaffrey gets a couple. It's just to see what they do with it, right? That wouldn't be hard to do for Cliff because, again, he's the puppeteer, the master of the offense. But I do think it is like this weird dynamic of like, hey, no, we're actually thinking about the Giants a little bit more than this game because, again, like fans, it's not as impactful because the real one's coming up here in a couple of weeks.
So last one on receiver then, Logan. If you think about this through the lens of like scheming teams up or the puzzle in the receiver room and what you're missing, is there one of those veterans? Let's just say we fast forward a couple of weeks and there is a 6th guy and it's one of the 3 veterans. It's either Gallup or Osborne or Moore. Is there someone that you think adds something to the room that is either lacking or interesting as a trait, or maybe that has separated themselves where you'd go, I'm interested in this guy because?
Yeah, I mean, I think KJ Osborne has flashed at times. He's had a couple opportunities. But for me, I think the most interesting one is Chris Moore. I feel like he's got the most nuance to his game, which makes sense because this is like year 9 or 10 for him. So, like, I like what I see from him. It's just, again, like, I like Moore, but he hasn't consistently caught the football since training camp started. I like some of the stuff that KJ Osborne does, but I'm a little bit worried about his lack of top end suddenness. Again, he flashes at moments, but the consistency of it. And Michael Gallup is just, again, when you take a year off football, I think people don't understand how hard it is to get back in football shape. And there are times where you see his vertical speed, you feel what he was a couple of years ago in Dallas, but like the consistency wasn't there. So for me, for that, and I've said this a bunch of times on the show, I just want a guy who's going to be incredibly consistent. And unfortunately, no one outside of like those top 4 or 5 guys we just talked about has been super consistent. So if there was one guy, if I had to put I don't feel great about the odds on any of them, but I'd have to say probably Chris Moore, just because.
And when you say consistent, just to be clear, so you would go with Moore, you're talking about as a route runner, being where you're supposed to be, doing, like, define that.
Yeah, so for him, it's different than what it is for KJ Osborne. Like, I think and this is to my eye, right? Again, like, I don't get to watch the All-22. You're kind of just watching it at practice. So, like, this is an incomplete evaluation, just to be fair to Chris Moore. But, like, he'll run a great route and then drop a ball, right? And it's like, damn, like, or he'll take a perfect angle on something. And that's where I think, that's what I like him. That's what I like so much about him, is the pre-catch stuff is top shelf. It's really good. Like, and he's not the fastest guy. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the most sudden guy, but he just, like, there's certain times when you watch people, like, you get it. You get how to run routes. You get how this is supposed to time up. You get the spacing. And again, he's played in the league for 10 years. Like, that's what I would expect from him, right? But again, it's for me, the consistency is like, when that's a tough catch, like, we got to make that happen, right? We got to make that happen for the offense. And I just feel like that hasn't happened consistently enough for him. And you look at KJ Osborne, and it's a little bit of the same. And Gallup is a little bit of the same. And so that's where it's kind of like, why I want one of those guys just be like, I can consistently make plays, do what I'm supposed to do, and make this football team. And I think that's why this offseason has been somewhat disappointing. I'm going to be very candid about that for me with regards to this position.
KJ Osborne, by the way, had 3 years in a row where he averaged over 600 yards with the Vikings. Kirk Cousins throwing him.
He's a player, man. I think that's the thing, is they've all played well.
Yeah, Chris Moore, when you look at his career, so it's Baltimore, Houston, Tennessee, Arizona, all before coming here. Like, that guy's caught 150 passes and about 1,800 yards in the league. I mean, he's made plays.
Yeah. And so that's where I'm saying, like, you see the route runner, you're like, dang, that's pretty cool. Or you see Michael Gallup's vertical speed, you're like, oh, let's get some of that. It's just this is such a derivative way of talking about it, but at some point we got to just make plays.
Yeah.
And no one has done it. And I think that's the thing that, like, last year you felt OZ every practice. You felt a little bit of, when Jameson was healthy, you felt him. You felt that veteran savvy, the contested catch, like, you felt those guys. And even Diami, you started to feel like them stacking days and stacking plays. And I think that's one of the reasons like this group sticks out to me as being relevant to this third game is like, is anybody going to kind of use this as an opportunity to be like, hey, this is me. And to be fair to them, like the quarterback play with the backup group, like when Mariota's out there, it's different than when, Sam Hartman or Josh Johnson's out there. And those guys have had their struggles. And I think that might be matriculating a little bit to the receivers as well, just to kind of, kind of have some empathy for their situation at the moment.
All right, so set the wide receivers to the side. I think that's a good spot to go deep on here and take out a shovel because it's the most fascinating area of the offense. I'm also intrigued by the line up front. And the reason is I feel great about what they're going to be in like week 10. I think it'll be the best line they've had in a long time, frankly. But right now, there are questions like Sam Cosmi's health. We don't know, is he going to be ready or not to start the season? Brandon Coleman has not practiced until midweek since August 2nd. He's been nursing something, right? So that's your two guard spots. Tunsil's been in and out, but he'll be plug and play, ready to go at left tackle, which is nice. I'll be curious to see what they do with Connerly in this game.
Yeah.
Because he's in this like in-between area of rookie who's raw, you want to get reps, who's looked awesome on tape so far, but also probably an important starter. So does he go in this game? Is there value for him, Logan, if there aren't any other starters on the line?
I think sometimes with those like more physical positions, like offensive line, like again, I've said this before, like offensive line play or like blocking, like tight end play or pass protection or run stuff in general, it's like a martial art, right? You just get used to the distances, the timing, the spacing, the strike, when I got to punch, how I got to punch, what this guy's going to throw. And so for offensive linemen, like I think back to when Bill Callahan was here and he used to just like spam reps at those guys. Like they'd end up like, after the first couple of weeks of training camp with like, 600 reps or something crazy like that. And you're like, that's diabolical. But like you could see each rep build on the last one. And so you get Brandon Sheriff coming into year 2 looking like an absolute dude, or Morgan Moses, who was this raw, traitsy tackle, right? And then he just kind of figures it out because they just get all these reps. So for him, and I think Coach Johnson does a good job, like taking individual and getting them a lot of like sparring reps is what I'd call them, right? Like you're getting an offensive lineman to rush you, but we're just working the line, we're being consistent. And so with him, yeah, I think I wouldn't hate if he got reps. And because again, like I think the more opportunities you get, even against lesser people, and sometimes I feel like for offensive linemen specifically, it's better to go against someone who's not quite as good because you can really focus on the technique. You're not like surviving out there. You're like, oh, I can really work my kick set. I can really work my hand placement. And so for him, I think that'd be great. And to your other point about like the offensive line in general, even though they are a little bit banged up, I don't know how you feel about this. I feel like this is the most confident I've felt in this group in a long time, because of Wiley's flexibility, because of Alec Gritty's flexibility. And then they go out inside Fant, who's a player that I have liked for a long time, offensive lineman. So it just feels like a very deep group with a ton of experience at multiple different spots. Even Trent Scott and Chris Paul, man, they can play all over that line. So it's like if there was an injury and they're going to be navigating a couple early in the season, like it just feels so incredibly consistent because of their ability to kind of plug and play guys with a ton of experience.
Now, this is the best put together line they've had here in a long time. It's professionally built and deep. I mean, it used to be, for years and years, the last guys in, if you're keeping 9 or 10 or whatever, are either like rookie mid-round picks who haven't played or journeyman types. And to your point, Trent Scott, who started in this league, or Chris Paul, who's a survivor for multiple regimes, and when he plays okay. Like those are the guys fighting right now for roster spots. It just tells you how deep this whole thing is. What do you like about George Fant? For people that aren't familiar, 75 career starts, signed this week. He's a veteran, 33 years old. I don't think you're bringing a guy like him in this late not to keep him, so I would think he would be their swing tackle. Most known probably for his time in Seattle, but he spent years with the Jets and then more recently the Texans and back with the Seahawks.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that seems to be fitting a mold of guy that they're looking for more consistently now. Like he's big. He's like 6'6"-ish. He's like 325. He's got 35-inch arms. He's like got the frame. And so when he was in Seattle, I want to say like he was a converted basketball player or something like that, and it took him a while to figure it out, and then figured it out. And you're like, man, this dude is – there's something about offensive linemen when they reach a certain size and length threshold, if their feet are good enough, that even if they're not technically good, like they're just too big to like get around. And I felt like that with Fant when he was at his best. He reminded me a lot, actually, of like Morgan Moses. Like Morgan is incredibly technical, so like not that part of his game, but just a guy who's long with good feet that understands the pass pro line. And I felt like he got to that point later in his career. Now he's had an injury. He had an injury last year for sure, and maybe an injury prior to that. So he's kind of negotiating kind of some late career bumps and bruises, but a guy that from a trait standpoint is everything you want. And I think honestly fits with what Coach Johnson has been looking for at the offensive line position. So it feels like he's going to come in, be that swing piece. I think he has played right and left. So traitsy, athletic, understands the position, played a lot of ball. He feels like a perfect swing piece for this group.
Last year, even as a veteran, not fully healthy, 65th percentile run blocker via PFF in the grading that they put out for him. They liked what he did in Seattle. All right, last one, the running back room. I don't think there's a lot of huge questions here now that we have a pretty good feel that Brian Robinson is going to be moving on, and you've got Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt making the team, Chris Rodriguez, his role. What I am curious about with the running backs is a pecking order or usage, right? And we're not probably going to get that answer or really see that until the season begins. And maybe it's a hot hand thing. Like maybe if Chris Rodriguez has a big drive to start the game against the Giants, maybe there's a little bit less merit in that game. Maybe it is situational. I mean, could you see that they're very different guys? Is it matchup dependent maybe, like week to week, where Rodriguez could be the B-Rob 14 to 16 carry guy one week and it's Merritt on first and second down the next week and Eckler stays in his third down role?
That's kind of exactly what I think it's going to be. It's like maybe the style of run they have on the first play or the personnel is going to dictate who's the runner. Like, and I think the hot hand thing is 100% right. And I think it's nice having the ability to do that. I think during portions of the year last year, we saw how effective that formula was. Like when B-Rod was out, it's McNichols or C-Rod, and all of a sudden one of them gets hot and looks like they can make some plays and get downhill, or they're catching the ball well. It's like, let that guy, let's let that guy get his touches. And so I think, as a coach, it's nice to have some flexibility and be like, okay, yeah, like this guy's not really feeling it today for whatever reason, nicked up, whatever, or the style of run we're calling doesn't fit that skill set. Oh, we got McNichols, or we got Bill Krosky-Merritt, or Austin Eckler is going to take the workload this week. So I think that to me is perfect. And like you said, the most interesting thing about the group is how it's going to be allocated, but we won't know that probably till at least week 1, but I'll probably honestly like week 5 when they've had a couple games under the belt to kind of show what they're thinking about in terms of rep allocation.
Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen on Take Command. All right, next up, the defense. Players to watch, position groups of intrigue going into a final preseason game. Baltimore Ravens coming to town this weekend. Welcome back to Take Command. Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen. This pick segment is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. My play going into this final batch of preseason games is to look for a team where they're going to have quality veteran quarterbacks coming off the bench to participate. You actually shaped a little bit of how I'm feeling about this bet when you said, if you've got someone on the field that the game matters to at quarterback or with NFL experience, you're probably going to be okay. And for that reason, I like the Colts plus 2.5 this weekend against the Cincinnati Bengals. Anthony Richardson going to get run likely. Just found out he's not going to be the starter. There's a lot on the line for him. You'd imagine that in a quarterback competition, you're going to have a veteran QB on the field at some point. So I like the Colts. I like the Saints as well for the same reason. Those are teams I'm looking at, Logan. You said it. If you got a quarterback playing with experience, these are the types of games where you should roll.
Yeah, I remember being in Atlanta and like Matt Schaub was the backup who'd play, and you were like, okay, we're going to win this game because like he knew everything, right? And so if you got a guy with a ton of experience, like I think that's a pretty smart way of looking at the preseason.
Once again, our picks segments brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Before we get to the defense, one last question on the running back room. You mentioned maybe situationally Rodriguez, Krosky-Merritt going to be used based on matchup. Based on what you've seen of Bill so far and what we know about Rodriguez, you've studied years of tape on him now. What are their strengths in terms of the run game? And I mean specifically like with what Cliff's calling. Like, do you have a feel yet for Krosky-Merritt on, hey, if they want to go power, like the counter tray with the pullers behind Rodriguez, he was so patient and then slammed into the hole. Like, what is his calling card versus Krosky-Merritt's, and how do they play off each other?
Yeah, I think like with Bill Krosky Merritt, like going back to his college stuff and then watching what he's done so far, like I feel like he's an excellent tight zone runner. Like he's just got a great feel. And I think you were talking about this like on the last show when you were saying like, oh, he had a couple muddy runs that he's able to maximize, right? Because he's able to kind of jump cut, get skinny, get vertical, and make a tackle for loss, a 3-yard gain. Like that, a feel is so challenging because not only are you running, but you're also setting up blocks. And I think that to me is kind of like his superpower, like the vision, the feel. How do I set this up? How do I hit this crease just right? And so I think that to me is his superpower. So anything that requires like a lot of nuance, right, I think is where he's going to excel. And also he just runs like a crazy horse. Like I'm kind of like when he runs so hard with such great knee drive. You're like, be careful, man. Like, don't want to hurt yourself here. You know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of what I think of him. And then C-Rod to me is, I don't know, one of the best power backs that I've seen in person. And I'm not saying that hyperbolically. Like his ability to get downhill and just run through someone's face with enough kind of wiggle laterally to make it so that it's not a car accident every single time is his superpower. Like there's no doubt about it. And so like anytime where it's like trap, wham, A gap power, like where we're getting downhill, shoulder square, we're hitting that crease really hard. And again, I'm not saying he can't run outside zone or run tight zone, because I do think he has some feel. But if I had to kind of give like what's your special ability, it's like I want him power downhill, shoulder square, and I want Bill Krosky Merritt in kind of those zones, kind of reading, setting up blocks a little bit more.
And you guys, as football fans, probably know that there's the same stories every year with various guys like, oh, this dude's in the best shape of his life. And, here's the proof in the pudding that Chris Rodriguez came in incredible shape, which was talked about. Number one, when I saw him with my eyes, I thought his body looks different. I mean, that is a more slender version of him. But he clocked at a speed in that game against Cincinnati that he hasn't really clocked that in his career. Like he worked on his speed. This reminds me of like skaters with the Capitals where they come back and they're just clocking at new times. I mean, he is faster legitimately with the chip data that they have on him than he was. So he still brings that power and now he adds that speed. But let's hop over to defense, Logan. I don't want to shortchange that side of the ball too much here because there are some position battles as Washington gets ready for the Ravens. Looking at the D-line first, we talked about the O-line being built deeper than it has been in a while. They're going to cut some really helpful players for teams. I don't remember this many veteran D linemen that are going to be scooped up, getting cut by Washington. So Armstrong, Payne, Kinlaw, Miller, Newton are kind of the heavy early rotation. A lot of Dietrich Wise, clearly. Cleveland Farrell, Eddie Goldman brought in for his size. So that's 8 names there. Barring a surprise, they're going to be around. The question, I guess, is do you keep 9? Do you keep 10? What does that look like? But among the other players here, Sheldon Day was really good for them last year. Jalen Holmes looks like he was built in a laboratory, and whenever he gets opportunities, makes plays. They drafted this group, this regime, didn't take Javonte Jean-Baptiste in the 7th round thinking he wouldn't eventually be a nice project for them. There are other guys, Carl Davis among them. I'm fascinated by, I texted you a couple times about Jacob Martin. I think he can help. I think he can rush the quarterback. He's kind of a Tasmanian devil coming off the edge, like just flailing his arms and getting past people. How are they going to sort out the back of this roster? What would you be looking for?
Yeah, to me, it's tough, man. And I think so. The thing with Jake, let's just take up Jacob Martin as like a case study. Like, I had a coach tell me one time, anytime you see any level of pass rush, you don't let it go. And I think Jacob Martin has some ability to rush the passer and affect the passer while playing efficiently on first and second down. So as much as I like Cleveland, I think he's an awesome dude. I think he's a great team leader. Like, is that maybe a position where you go a different direction, right? And you say, hey, like, let's find a guy that's got some pass rush juice, pass rush upside. Or do you feel that that's redundant with Von Miller? I personally don't, right? But I think, you have Jalen Holmes who could probably get the practice squad. So if something happened to Dietrich Wise, you have your big end that could replace him right there. So I just think it becomes a really interesting landscape, quite honestly, especially with how well Dorrance has been playing on first and second down in conjunction with the stuff he's done on third down. So the room is really interesting, especially like that 4th defensive end spot. Are we keeping an extra defensive tackle? The Jean-Baptiste injury to me is super interesting because I thought for a while he was a lock to make the team, but he hasn't practiced for probably like 2.5 weeks at this moment. So it just becomes really compelling. And I think the other one that I think is interesting is like Carl Davis has actually flashed a little bit, and so do you say, hey, he's a little bit cheaper, a little bit younger compared to Eddie Goldman. And so, like, as much as this room feels deep and super set, there are some interesting kind of like maybe Carl Davis comes out and has a baller third preseason game and is able to usurp some of the stuff that Eddie Goldman's done. So really interesting, I think, group in terms of depth. And again, like Sheldon Day, man, like he just plays good ball. He's not like your prototypical defensive tackle, but he plays good ball. But my thought is like with the expanded practice squad size, like could you probably get him in a practice squad? Yeah. And then you have a really good football player that can come up and elevate depending on rotation.
Yeah, I think that is the good news, is with the majority of the guys we're talking about, you could keep them in the building on the practice squad for sure. I always try to be aware of the fact that there's just so much we don't know. Like I play a GM on the radio for 4.5 hours every day. But what I mean by that is, I'm going to be doing these segments as well on Grant and Danny on the Fan, where we're talking about who's in and who's out and who would we keep. And to really have the answers, I would need to know more about their paradigm. Like this offseason, it seemed to me like they wanted to get bigger and more physical and to prioritize stopping the run with personnel. I don't know if that's because you're in a division with Saquon Barkley, who torched you 3 times, and including the NFC Championship game, or because the Eagles are who you're chasing and that's what they are, or just because they felt like, as one of the 5 to 7 teams that really struggled to stop the run at times last year, that's where they had to improve the most. But you saw it in what they went and did. They didn't go get speed rushers who could get 15 sacks, or they didn't bring in another Dante Fowler. No, it's Dietrich Wise. It's Goldman with that size that you feel, or even down the depth chart like Carl Davis you're talking about.
Or even Kinlaw, right? Like that addition is like a big physical kind of run stopper first, right? So
100% Kinlaw, you paid him a lot of money to be that guy. And so I wonder, what is their plan to get their sacks? If the way they view it is like, we need to get to this pressure rate, we need to get to this level of consistency of moving a quarterback off his mark. A lot of that could be Luvu coming down, who I think is one of the more underrated pass rushers in the league as a straight up skill. And they're going to draw things up. Maybe it's dogs with a 5th guy and blitzes with a 6th guy, and they're going to just move people around. I don't know what their plan is, but I would like to know that, to know who stays and who goes, if that makes sense. What you're going to major in? We want to major in stopping the run, and we'll figure the sack stuff out. Or is like your philosophy has kind of always been mine. Can you rush the quarterback? You go stand over there. This is the guys that make it, and now I'm going to work on the rest of this over here. Like, that's kind of how I would build my front. But last year, they had such a tough time stopping the run. I wonder what they're thinking in that regard.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too. You mentioned the paradigm. Like, obviously, there's a schematic element of how they're viewing what they need to do and how they need to improve and how they get sacks and how they stop the run. But also, I think the other element that I always seemingly forget about when I'm doing draft evaluations and when I'm doing this is the interpersonal stuff. Like, I really like player X. Like, he's a good dude, and he helps our team from a chemistry mindset standpoint. And so even though it's like, oh man, like player A, player B are really close, really similar, it's like I have a personal preference for this guy, or I think he's got a higher ceiling. And so, or he's really great in the meeting, or he's great at mentoring young players, or he's great with whatever. And there is value to that kind of soft skill stuff that I think as fans we forget about, because it's like, oh, here are the X's and they're tackling the O's, and here's all this stuff. But it's a people game, right? And so, like, how do some of these moves affect the roster? And I think when you're in a tight position race like this, I think that's something to consider. And to your point about stopping the run, I think when you look at that first defensive line that came out against Cincinnati, is Dietrich Wise, Daron Payne, Javon Kinlaw, and Dorrance Armstrong. Like, they want that to be a priority for them. And when you look at the first couple third downs, it's Dietrich Wise with Jacob Martin, and Dietrich Wise off the field, Jacob Martin's on the field, Dorrance Armstrong's rushing as a 3 technique, Frankie Louva's at the edge. Like, I think that's the direction you're going to go, is you get kind of your pass rushing guys on the field and your nickel or your dime packages and say, like, go hunt. So it almost feels like it's 2 separate, like, to make a hockey analogy, 2 separate lines. You have like your penalty kill line and your baseline, and your baseline is going to be big, thick, and beefy, and then your penalty kill line is going to be fast and dynamic. So,
which is super smart, by the way, and is the way the league is trending. Like, I'm old enough now to remember I would go to the grocery store and buy that magazine at the beginning of training camp, and it would like have the little graphics of football players, and it would show you who the depth chart was. And like the 4D linemen played 75% of the time, and then there was like backups. You know what I mean? And that was, when you look back at it, like, that's so stupid. That's a dumb way to do it. But we just didn't know what we didn't know. I think about it like baseball. We're platooning guys. Oh, he's good, a lefty against a righty. Cool. Well, but he's not good against lefty, so let's get him out of there. Everyone's being used in a way that maximizes what they can be. Now, to your point, sports are about people. You need buy-in. You need people that are willing to say, to know their shortcomings and go, no problem. I think you're right. Let's get the most out of me.
Yeah.
Let's do that. And that's what you're trying to find, is a room where that works and the pieces fit together. But I actually love what they're trying to do, which is to say it's roles. It's not like 3 down defensive end who's going to play until he's tired at all. That's not where they are at this point. So
Right.
I think they're in a good place with kind of what they're putting together to improve from last year, where they were 30th against the run, yards per game. Better metric really is yards per play. They were 28th there, 4.77. What about linebacker? Is there anybody I should be zoning in on here, especially with the Jordan McGee injury lingering? Is there a spot to be had? I feel like Kane Madrano's got to be in, the way he's played defensively and the way he can help on teams.
Yeah, I think he feels like a lock at this point, quite honestly. Like he, in the last game with Bobby Wagner out, he's the first rotational linebacker in, and I think does a pretty good job, man. Like obviously there's some stuff that needs to be improved from a tackling standpoint. Like he is that tackle where he misses down, where Cincinnati's coming out going towards the tunnel at Northwest Stadium. But I think you see the movement skills. He can cover grass. Like he feels very like something they don't have from a coverage linebacker standpoint, and someone that's going to learn and develop. And Ken Norton knows him really well. And then obviously they're really high on McGee, but hasn't played in the preseason because of the injury. Same thing as that happened last year. And the guy that kind of stuck out to me watching film was Alhe Cajo, the other linebacker from UCLA. Like he was physical, downhill, took on blocks well. Now I think he's somewhat limited as a coverage player, but like, does he make a push if McGee starts the year on PUP? And even if he doesn't, I think he's a great practice squad addition. So that room to me has become really interesting. And I also think Duke Riley, man, like the veteran, making a push, maybe as teams, maybe a practice squad guy. I think that's kind of compelling also. But really interesting group, more interesting than it's been the past couple of years, just in terms of youth and kind of people to be excited about from a playmaking standpoint.
I've also seen a few more snaps in the preseason, it feels like, where they have one linebacker on the field, and even added DBs. Like it's become more commonplace talking about changes in the league to have, it's no longer Sam, Will, and Mike, right? It's like the 2 backers and the extra DB or the big extra physical player in the box. It's generally a safety type. But now we've even seen them add another DB at times and have one linebacker out there. We'll see how much they implement that as the league continues to trend to offenses that spread you out and use more pass catchers on the field, even on running downs. All right, last thing, give me some DBs or some thoughts on the secondary. Let's look at that position group before we say bye. I think there's pretty much set in stone spots early, and we've seen
feels like that, right? Doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean Harris had a great camp at safety next to Quan Martin, Lattimore, Sanders still, Trey Amos at corner. They've been raving about Jeremy Reeves. Is there one of these guys down the depth chart who you're intrigued to watch one final time?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 guys down the depth chart. Robert McDaniel is he's got the frame, and I think he made some plays in the last game. Early in camp, it was a little bit slow for him, and I feel like he's starting to figure it out. Played a little bit DB in college from a HBCU, so small school guy, but like corner, safety, little linebacker even. And you see some of those physical traits. So he feels like a guy that I want at least as a practice squad player. And then a guy that flashes when he's in is Ben Nickel, number 48. He looks like a linebacker out there, but he's been making tackles in the run game. He made a couple tackles on teams, and I'm not saying he's going to make the 53, but in terms of guys that maybe are making a push for the practice squad that are young guys that I think are well liked in the locker room, those seem like guys that are going to make a shot. And then Carlin Viggers too, man, gosh, he's had a really solid camp. And again, he had the rough outing against New England, but I thought he kind of righted the ship a little bit versus Cincinnati. So dude, Adam Peters has done such a great job, honestly, with this roster, because you look at it and you're like you said it, and I think this is a really astute observation, is you're going to cut some good football players with a lot of experience aren't going to make the team. And I know this sounds crazy, but that's what you want. And so I look at this and I say, man, they're in a really good spot. They have a lot of flexibility in the secondary. They have a lot of flexibility at the defensive line. And it's nice to talk about a defense with that kind of depth heading into the season.
One final tune-up. Next time Logan and I are chatting, we'll be discussing a roster being formed and looking ahead to the real deal Holyfield, a week 1 game with the New York Giants. Remember to watch us on YouTube, 1067 The Fan, the Team 980. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple, the Odyssey app, wherever you get your podcasts. For Logan Paulsen, I'm Grant Paulsen, saying so long for Take Command. Enjoy Commanders Ravens.